Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's Planning Committee. My name's Councillor White, John White. I'm the chairman, and on my left I have my vice chairman, Councillor Heaney. The other councillors who are members of the committee are sitting on the two side tables, and the committee will be the persons that will debate and vote finally on the applications. On my left and right are TDC officers, including Head of Planning and the committee solicitor. This is a formal meeting, and it's important that councillors do hear all the presentations and are able to debate quietly. So I'll just ask you not to interrupt the speakers. The order of business tonight is as standard. That is, the first thing will be an officer presentation, and then we shall have any public speaking, and then further officers' comments if there's any questions that get raised. Then committee members will ask questions, debate, and finally vote on it. And this evening's meeting is being recorded by the council. So, unusual, we haven't got a particularly long agenda tonight, so we'll go to the minutes of the last meeting for any accuracies, omissions or any such things. There's nothing raised by any member. Therefore, can I sign them as a true and correct record? I can. Thank you very much. That I will do. Now, declarations of interest. Right, I have one straight away from my Vice Chairman, Councillor Heaney.
I'm ward member for Great Bromley, which will be the first application that we look at. Although I don't actually live, although I live in Great Bromley, I don't live near this site.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 5A2, application 1101150, detailed 21 Mays Lane. I am a resident of Mays Lane. Also, the original outline application for this application, several of the objectors to it are known to me, so I will withdraw from the committee for this item. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now I can see we have... yes, Councillor Guglielmi.
No, I'm just saying I'm a substitute. We didn't get that bit. I'm substituting for Zoe tonight, okay?
Thank you very much for that. Yes, officially, Val is a substitute. Right, and then we have two councillors I can see sitting in the body of the hall. Councillor Scott.
Yes, Chairman. I'd like to bear interest in the councillor for the third item on the agenda, 17/01221, detailed Blue Gates Farm, Colchester Main Road, Holsted. I'm bearing interest as with the councillor, and I will be speaking tonight. And also, I'm a parish councillor for Holsted Parish Council.
Oh yes, I forgot to say that I'm a parish councillor for Great Bromley nowadays.
Good.
Thanks, Gareth.
And yes, Councillor.
Item A1, planning application 16/01927.
Thank you very much. No further declarations. Right. Then we move straight on to item A1. You'll find that on page 7 through to 16. It's application number 1601927 outline. It's for land north of Harwich Road, Great Bromley. Turn to Mrs. Bicknell.
Thank you, Chair. This first slide shows the application site just annotated with a red star. So it's in that field to the north of Harwich Road. There's the application site outlined with the red line, and you'll see the application site extends east and west along the edge of the highway. And we'll talk a bit more about why that's the case later on. So the site, there's a woodland to the south of Harwich Road here, and then there's a bungalow development in here in Meadow Close. And so that you can get your bearings, the old Courthouse Inn is down here to the west of the site. This map is quite important in terms of showing the context of the site. So the application site that we're looking at this evening is here, in the centre of the slide. There's the A120, scooping through it, going off that way, and the A133. And the nearest two settlements are the village of Great Bromley, and the settlement development boundary for Great Bromley is here, and so the settlement is hatched in there. And then, so that's about 1.5 kilometres north of the site. And then Freighting is to the south, and the edge of the Freighting settlement boundary is here. So again, the hatched area shows you the settlement as defined in the local plan of Freighting, and that's about 900 metres to the south of the site. The primary school for Great Bromley is up here. There's the village hall sort of part way down there. It's quite a dispersed settlement. And as I said, the pub, the Court Inn, is down here. Okay. So the site itself is outside settlement boundaries, and the settlements of Great Bromley and Freighting are both categorised as smaller rural settlements in the local plan, the boundaries of which have been drawn with some flexibility to allow for a small amount of infill development within those settlement boundaries, but the general presumption is to resist development outside the settlement boundaries. Obviously, we've had a period here where the council's been unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, and so the council have had to apply that sort of skewed MPPF policy approach to looking at development proposals, even outside development boundaries, against the three strands of sustainability. But since we were able to demonstrate that 5-year supply earlier in the year, back in May, the planning committee and officers have been able to apply more weight to the local plan policies in the sort of normal fashion without that skewed approach. Perhaps just worth mentioning as well, there's a site here where planning permission was granted for a village shop and for 6 houses, and that was during the time when the council wasn't able to demonstrate the 5-year housing land supply. So that's the sort of significant difference really between the two. Obviously in locational terms they're very similar, but that was at a time when we were having to apply the policy in a different way. This application is in outline with all matters reserved, but we've been provided with an indicative layout plan. This is an amended indicative layout plan. The original one showed 2-storey development, and that's reflected in the report that you've got. The update makes reference, the update that's on the green sheet for you tonight, makes reference to a change to that. So it now, the indicative drawing shows bungalows with the central dwelling being a sort of 1.5-storey dwelling. Okay. Those changes address one of the issues that's raised in the report about the relationship with properties in Meadow Close, but it doesn't change the recommendation of refusal, because that's really about the principle of development in this location. This plan shows, the amended plan also shows the provision of a footpath along the front of the site and going off to the west and to the east. The original plan, when the application was submitted, didn't show that, and at that point the county highway said they had no objection to the development in this location without the footpath, and they've subsequently confirmed they have no objection to it with the footpath either. obviously the implication of that is if there was ever an application in the future without the footpath, you wouldn't expect there to be any highway objection. So no highway reason for refusal if the footpath wasn't provided. There's an indicative, an illustration of the indicative street scene. You can see the one and a half storey dwelling in the middle with 3 bungalows on either side, which, as you can see, is fairly typical of the closest development to this site. So that's a view from the road across to Meadow Close, the nearest residential properties to this site. And that's looking into the site from the road with those same bungalows off to the side. And an image looking sort of along the road and across the site towards the existing access, and the indicative plan indicates that the access would be likely to be provided in that location. And again, a view of the road itself and the verge where the footpath would be provided. We've had some additional plans from the applicant to demonstrate that a 2 metre wide footpath could be accommodated there without damaging the hedgerow and without needing to alter the ditch that runs along the back of that grass verge. The Parish Council are supportive of this application on various conditions, one of which is that there's the drainage of the field is sorted out. They have some concerns that it floods at the moment, and also that the footpath that's proposed is provided, is secured, and thirdly that a wildlife area is provided within the site. There's just a couple, one last image there, so I'll take you back to the indicative layout plan. So, Chairman, the recommendation in relation to this application is for refusal because the site is outside the development boundary, and the Council is now able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and so development in this location would be contrary to the plan-led approach. It's considered to be environmentally unsustainable and would cause harmful urbanisation and erosion of the rural character of this area. There's a lack of services in the area, and so it's considered to be socially unsustainable.
Thank you very much. Now, I don't have any member of the public speaking in favour of the application or indeed speaking against the application. And so could I call Councillor Robert Day, who's Great Bromley Parish Council. Welcome, sir. If you like to get yourself settled and get the microphone live if you can by just pushing that button, that's it, and you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening everybody. Could I just ask the planning officer if you could flash up the plan that showed the village for the development plan? Thank you. Right. Great Bromley Parish is probably the largest parish in tendering, acreage-wise, and it consists of 4 largish settlements within it and lots of houses in between. If we look at the bottom of the plan, you've got the freighting end of Great Bromley, which is just sub 100 households. The site where the development's going to proposed to be taking place is just sub 150 households. And then if we look at the part of the map that shows Great Bromley Village, which is a small part of the parish, is actually, I think it's about just over 100 households there. So where the development site is exceeds the amount of houses in the Great Bromley Centre. And then it's further complicated by a part that's not on the map, which I believe is something like 80 odd households, which is the Bromley Cross End. Fantastic village, fantastic place to live. The main problem that we have is actually getting about safely. If you live at the Hare Green end, where the application is, there's one way to get to the school, which is a small back alley, which the parents don't like the children to go along. If I live at the freighting end, you have to run the gauntlet of some footpath and verge. That's just to get about the village. There's a sort of reasonable footpath between the courthouse and the main village. And then between the main village and the cross end, it's a 60-mile-an-hour gauntlet. So the children of the village, the people of the village, cannot get around safely unless you use a car. There's a recent approval for a site at Little Paddocks, which is just across the road, which included a shop, a village shop, which, to have a village shop, you need access. And the footpath that comes with the application is key to access, because 150 households in Hare Green would not be able to access that shop. So that shop is a dead duck. Likewise, the freighting end. The application at Little Paddocks includes another proviso for footpaths. You know, there are conditions that when that development goes ahead, there are footpaths. So the part of the jigsaw puzzle to access the village facilities from the freighting end is put in place. This is another part of the jigsaw puzzle to access from the larger settlement at Hare Green, to access the village hall, the church. Besides what's been said, that there are no facilities, Little Bromley has probably got one of the best village halls in Essex. And it's got a thriving church and it's a thriving community. The only problem is it's not safe to walk or cycle. Even though this is not in the settlement boundaries, there's a huge windfall from this. It's a golden opportunity for the people of the village to be able to get around safely. Some of the councillors, the district councillors, have been campaigning for some time, as has the parish council, to have footpaths. There's no budget in Essex. We've got a windfall, golden opportunity from a developer who will spend a lot of money on putting these facilities in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And now, Councillor Fred Nichols.
Good evening, Chairman, councillors and members. As already declared, I'm one of the ward councillors for Great Bromley and a parish councillor. I would like to follow on from Councillor Day in drawing your attention to a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring the village of Great Bromley together. You can see where the A120 goes through it. It's all marked sort of turquoise colour. And this totally wrecked the village. It used to be able to go between various parts of the village without too much problem. But since the A120 has gone in, there is no safe means, apart from a car, to go from Hare Green to the village hall, to the cricket field, to the school, or to the church. People talk about sustainable developments. Well, surely this is one, because the developer is providing a link so that people from Hare Green can walk to the school, to the village hall, to the cricket club, or to the church. Now, are you going to deny the people of Hare Green that opportunity? Also, it should be borne in mind that on the plan where the church and the school is, if you can come this way slightly, you'll see a bend in the road just before the A120. Outline permission has been given for, I think it's 20 houses down there on that bend, of which 12 are affordables. Affordable housing usually means an opportunity for young families, we hope, with children. The families with children, if they wish to go to Hare Green playing field, which is in Hare Green towards Harwich from the site, that means they've got to get their cars out. You were there this morning, you saw what the roadway was like. Would you like to walk along that road with the traffic that comes along there? We've got heavy goods vehicles coming from the port of Harwich going towards freighting. You've got heavy goods vehicles from freighting coming to the crossroads opposite the courthouse and turning right. So you've got no protection whatsoever along that bit of road. And I do strongly urge you, please, to consider it and consider the residents of Great Bromley, because if this development goes ahead, it will become a sustainable site. The other thing I'd like to add is that there is now an improved bus service that comes along Harwich Road that stops at Hare Green and at the courthouse, a direct link between Harwich and Colchester, which is fairly new, certainly within the last 2 or 3 months. And that is also an important fact to consider for sustainability. Essex County Council Highways have approved the footpath, which is a surprise to many. They have not got any funding whatsoever to provide a footpath. This is our only chance of making the village safer and more sustainable, because less people will have to rely upon their cars. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Tim Snow, the agent. Welcome, sir. I needn't tell you all the house rules. You've been here so many times before, so
yeah, I'm sorry about
you've got 3 minutes.
Following on the idea that each scheme should be considered on its merits as a basis of planning, some things in planning policy confuse me somewhat, and I guess perhaps you too. And following on from something that Councillor Day just mentioned, I did a quick check on the settlements and how they relate to this application. Mrs Bicknell talked about Freighting, Great Bromley and Hare Green. Freighting has around 120 houses, it has a pub, has a church, and it has a good deal of nearby employment. That's got a defined settlement boundary. Great Bromley, within the settlement boundary, has about 36 houses. It has a school, it has a church, it's got a nursing home, so it has some employment, and that's in a defined settlement boundary. Hare Green has in excess of 135 houses. It has a substantial recreation ground, it has a pub with restaurant and holiday accommodation, there's employment at Talisman and Selector Cars, but it's not in a settlement, and I find that a bit confusing, really. Moving on to things that confuse me on planning policy as well, the scheme at Little Paddocks has been mentioned across the road, and I appreciate that that was done a year ago, but the officer's report on that says that the development will not adversely affect the character of the area, and it meets the 3 strands of sustainability. This proposal is 150 metres away within sight of that, but apparently it's not sustainable, and it adversely affects the character of the area. And you can perhaps understand a little bit of confusion. If I can expand a bit more on detail. The plans with the outline application are illustrative, as been said, and we've amended them to show the bungalows, and that follows on from comments that we've received. The expansion of the footpath we've actually put forward on highway land as part of this development was also done through a consultation approach. And my client is fine with providing the bungalows and providing with a footpath. Each plot on this site includes a bungalow with a garage and a parking space. In some cases, there's room for more than one parking space. They're served by an access road, 5.5 metres wide. So that would allow for some short-term parking and dropping off, and there's a turning head in there so cars can exit the site safely. The proposed footpath has been surveyed, drawn, subjected to both road safety audit and the county section 278 appraisal, which is a kind of technical appraisal. No trees are lost and the hedgerow can be managed. It provides safe access for the management of the hedgerow in the future. Regarding the flooding, our client and the neighbouring site have not experienced flooding on their field, and they've confirmed that in writing as part of this application. We are aware of some nearby flooding, but I believe this was tracked down to some block ditches and has now been resolved. The runoff from the bungalows will be managed, attenuated, and ditches can then be accessed in the future and will come under the control of the county highways. So it will be their fault. The site, in my opinion, can be considered as a deliverable windfall site and can deliver, as we've heard, considerable social and safety benefits, and I commend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Turn to Mrs. Bicknell to see if there's any comments that she wished to pick up.
I'll just pick up a couple, Chair. In terms of the size of the various sort of settlements in the area and whether or not they have settlement boundaries, there was a piece of work done about 18 months ago that was reported to the local plan committee, which agreed the settlement hierarchy for the district. So I know Mr Snow said there's sort of some foibles about that, he thinks, about that particular piece of work, but it is actually a piece of evidence that the local plan committee discussed and agreed, and so the policies in the plan should be applied in accordance with the settlement hierarchy as it currently stands for the authority. It might be subject to change at some point, or review at some point in the future, which means that at present Great Bromley has a settlement boundary, as does Freighting, and those are marked on the plan there for you. But the area where this particular development proposal is doesn't have one. And even with the footpath provision, it obviously would still remain quite some distance. It wouldn't change the location. It might make it slightly easier for people to walk away from the site towards those other settlements, but it doesn't change the overall, obviously, location and distance from them. I'm happy to answer questions, Chair.
Right, Councillor, now is your chance. Councillor Guglielmi.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the footpath. Where does the footpath go once it stops at the pub? Is there a footpath that takes you right the way down to the school? Yeah. That's a safe footpath, is it, all the way? Yeah. Because I don't remember seeing one, and that was my concern. It was quite a way away from where the school is. Thank you.
If you don't mind, Ramsey.
Yes, Councillor Everett.
Thank you. I'm a little bit confused about the status of the NPPF 5-year housing land supply, etc., in relation to this application. I understand that having a 5-year housing land supply does mean that the presumption in favour of development is therefore not an issue. However, where my confusion is where this application sits within the rules, because it is a windfall development, so therefore under 10 houses. And I'd be grateful for some guidance as to how it is that should be treated in relation to the presumption of development or otherwise.
Would you like to?
Yeah, it would be in the same way as a site that was larger. So we have a windfall, we do a calculation of what might come forwards in terms of windfall sites, but we assume they will come forward in line with policy. So they would come forward within our existing settlements. And the boundaries of the settlements have been drawn to allow a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of kind of slack, if you like, to allow for some infill to take place. So we would expect windfalls to happen primarily within settlement boundaries. You don't need to treat them differently.
Other speakers? Yes, Councillor McWilliams.
Just forgive me my ignorance, but we're talking about settlement boundaries, but what about Hare Green? I am assuming that that doesn't have a settlement boundary. Am I correct?
That's correct. There are a number of clusters of houses around the district which don't have a settlement boundary around them, and so the open countryside policies apply. So there's a presumption against development in those areas in the terms of our local plan.
Councillor Heaney?
Sorry, just putting your name down. Yes, well, I want to talk about, I know I'm supposed to talk about the houses and only concentrate on the houses because I'm on the planning committee. But without the houses, we will never get a footpath, and we really need a footpath. We've only got to think of Tenpenny Hill, Thorrington, which Gary will confirm and is nodding at the moment. We have tried for years and years and years and years to get a footpath, and people are prepared to give up their gardens to have a footpath, and they don't provide one. And there's never going to be one. I mean, I'll be dead and gone long before there is one. And like this road here, which I've forgotten what it is, the B something or other, to Colchester, it is as dangerous as Thorrington Hill. And cars zoom about along it. Only last week, I believe, they had a speed watch in Hare Green, or a few weeks ago, and the cars were going up to 65 miles an hour. I mean, through there in a 40-mile limit. It is so dangerous. And this is tacked on, this site here is tacked on to the largest settlement in the whole of the village, and quite a considerable size more than the around the church, where the houses are bigger. These are smaller houses, bungalows, there's a lot of them. I mean, if you look at the map, it doesn't look too different in size, but I can assure you there's many, many more houses in Hare Green. Really, that's what I want to say, and I have to vote for this because, although I'm quite sure the head of planning will disapprove very much, and probably the chairman as well, I'm a ward councillor, I'm a parish councillor, and I have to think what is best for my ward and my village. And I'll come back when everybody else has finished.
Right.
Again, to please. So we've got Everett.
Yeah, good. I'm getting a nice little list now. I don't think, from what we saw this morning, there is much argument that a footpath is needed. It's just a question now of whether or not this is the right way of getting the footpath. Councillor Everett.
That leads me on nicely to my sort of question, really, which is that if the committee were minded to pass this because of the gains for the locality, are there any reasons why that would actually be unlawful or inappropriate?
Right. I'll ask Mrs. Bicknell to comment on that, just because it has a bearing on...
Thank you, Chairman. Well, committee will remember, no doubt, that there are various tests for the imposition of planning conditions. So if you're wanting to secure a piece of infrastructure, you would either do that via planning condition or a legal agreement, and the tests are broadly the same. And one of them is that development must be necessary. It has to be relevant to planning, to the development. It must be necessary to make the development acceptable. In this particular case, we're aware that the Highway Authority were content with the application in the absence of the footpath, which makes it very difficult to give the reason for providing the footpath, that it's in the interest of highway safety, because the statutory consultee is indicating otherwise. They're saying it would be acceptable without that condition. The other implication, of course, of that is that if the application came forward again in the future without the footpath, what you would expect the Highway Authority not to object to the development without the footpath. So the other gain that you might think is there by having the footpath is an increase in social sustainability of the site. So not a sort of actual highway safety issue, but a more rounded kind of social sustainability argument. I think that's quite weak because, as I said earlier, it doesn't make the site any closer to those facilities. Yes, it is near quite a few other houses, but it's still fairly remote from the various facilities of the village, hence the lack of a settlement boundary and its low position, if you like, in the settlement hierarchy that the council has adopted. Whether securing the provision of the footpath by condition would make the decision unlawful, I don't think we could say for certain tonight. Obviously, that would be open potentially for somebody to challenge if they felt that it was an attempt to secure something that was desirable and attractive. And as we've said, everybody I think in the room would agree it's attractive to provide a footpath, but that doesn't make it a lawful decision or an appropriate thing to do, as Councillor Everett hinted.
Talking of lawful decisions, I think I'd just ask the solicitor to see if she wants to make any comments on it.
Yeah, it's just following on from what Kath said, really. Obviously, Kath gave the example of if another application in the same site came forward, what would happen. The other thing that obviously could happen is once conditions are put in place or legal agreements are put in place, it's open to the applicant in certain circumstances to apply to have those varied. Now, the reason that you would look to vary it is if it wasn't required in the first place. So if a condition had been put in place that actually wasn't required, okay, it's nice, but it's not a requirement under planning terms, which obviously Kath has gone through why that is the case, that it isn't, then we would be very hard pushed to find a reason to not agree to that variation. So you have to be mindful that there is the option in the future for the applicant to make such an application, and what the outcome of that would be and the implication for the footpath. That's just something else to think about.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, the footpath, to me, seems to only apply to the houses that are going to be built. Because if the footpath wasn't there, they could still get from the other end that way to wherever they want to go, or just to the pub this way. All we've heard from most of the speakers is how dangerous that road is, and now they want to add to it by building another 7 dwellings along that road, because they're putting in a footpath. It's nowhere near the settlement developments that were agreed for the local plan, which is actually going in very shortly, isn't it, apparently? I can only concur with the officers and totally disagree with this building, and I'd like to put up for refusal, put a motion for refusal.
Right, I'll take that as a proposal, but I think that I've still got a list of other speakers, so I won't look for a seconder yet. Councillor Binnison.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the recent comments, so my comment may be a bit out of date, but Mrs Bicknell did talk about, when we were talking about settlement boundaries earlier, she mentioned that there is a degree of flexibility amongst these, and this particular application, with the benefits it would bring, could be considered to be something that would need a degree of flexibility, but only if we are certain that this footpath is going to be built. So, as I say, it's probably a bit out of date with the recent comments. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I remember what I wanted to ask. The last gentleman that spoke mentioned about the application across the road and the officer's comments with regard to not being detrimental and everything else. How much, or if any, weight can we give? Because if we're saying that this one isn't, but that one was fine, I appreciate we've got to look at this on its own, but that does have a bearing, I think, on any decision that we may make, even if that decision was made prior to having the 5-year housing land supply. Thank you.
Right. I've got a similar application, I must admit, in a place in St Joseph where it's deemed to be, it's at Chisholm Heath, no beating about the bush, and the inspector has not upheld the applicant and has upheld the council on the grounds that it is a small rural area, and he refused it. Councillor Heaney.
I'd like to make the point that the one opposite is further from the settlement than this one, which is much nearer the settlement. And the footpath will go right down the settlement. The reason that the settlement doesn't get walk to the east is because we're all cut off by the A120 and the A133, which sweeps round it. So really, you've got to go to the west towards Colchester and then turn up to the rest of the settlement.
Right. Further speakers? Before I ask for a second, I'll go to Mrs. Bignell.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just pick up 2 or 3 comments that were made. Councillor Heaney talked about the need for the footpath and the desirability of the footpath in the village, and her role as ward councillor. Completely understand there is a desire to have a footpath in this location, but the committee, the councillors on the committee obviously do have to act in the as district councillors in making planning decisions, and all planning decisions have to be made in accordance with the development plan unless there are material planning considerations that dictate otherwise. And so it is one of those unusual committees where you are required to set aside those sort of ward and more local issues to look at it within the framework of the district plan. And I suppose my main concern with that is really about how this policy will be applied elsewhere. The council has just reached a position where it is able to apply its saved policies without that skewed application that's required of the NPPF if we don't have a 5-year housing land supply. The chairman just mentioned one particular appeal decision. There have been quite a number, the vast majority of which have supported the council's saved policies. One exception to that, which the council are challenging, and so I think committee just need to bear in mind that the way it applies policy in this case will no doubt be noticed by developers and the community in terms of other sites as well. In terms, Councillor Bennison talked about the degree of flexibility. I perhaps wasn't clear enough. What I was trying to say was the settlement boundaries as they have been drawn and adopted by the council include a degree of flexibility to allow development to happen within them as drawn, rather than the policy saying that you can apply those development boundaries flexibly. So the flexibility is already built in, and the policy would say it would expect development within them but not without them, or out with them. Councillor Baker asked about the site opposite and the reference in the officer's report to it not being detrimental or harmful to the appearance of the area, the character of the area. I must admit I didn't read that today to remind myself of the detail. But what I would say is that was a report written in a very different context. So it was written when the council didn't have the 5-year housing land supply, and the government is very clear that in those situations its drive to significantly increase the delivery of housing is, by far the biggest thing that needs to be taken into account. And the other issues carry far less weight, as we've seen through the appeals that we've had over the last couple of years. And yes, obviously each site has to be dealt with on its own merits, and I didn't remind myself of the detail of whether that site is very different in terms of landscape impact, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Fowler, and then it'll be Councillor Everett after.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite a lot of information to take on board with this one, and difficult to know which way to go. And taking everything into consideration, I have to support the officer's recommendation for refusal for this application, and I will second Councillor Hone's proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, so I have a proposer and a seconder. I shan't take the vote as I'd already called Councillor Everett, but...
Thank you. I find myself in a very difficult position to weigh this all up. I'm known for and really advocate the 5-year housing supply. So that is a big big area for me in terms of consideration of this determination. But equally, on the other side, I have the opposing view, effectively, that I believe that the particular gain for the community of Hare Green is something that's worth having. So it makes it very, very difficult to weigh this up. But I think I come probably to the decision myself that the 5-year housing land supply has to win out in that argument. So with reluctance in some way, I will be supporting the motion of the two councillors.
Thank you very much. That sums up the views of most of us, I think, that it is a difficult one. No further speakers, in which case I have a proposer and a second for refusal in line with the officer's recommendation, and the reasons are shown on the top of page 9. Are there any other bits that need to be either added or taken out from those reasons? None? Right, I'm going to put it to the vote then. Those in favour of refusal of this application, please show. 1, 2, 3, got 5, 6. Right.
Could we just have a clearer show of hands?
Yes.
Sorry, I think Katie and I have lost one somewhere. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right. And those against? 1 shown against. So that application is refused. Thank you, councillors. A difficult one.
I'll be shown as abstaining, please.
Yeah, everyone else will be.
Everybody is this one. Yeah. All right. We now move over to planning application number A2. This is the one where Councillor Fowler, I think, is leaving us. It's application number 17011150, and it's yeah, she's just gone and declared an interest. That's why I did invite her to leave.
I forgot it was that one. I thought it was the other one. Sorry, I don't see now. Sorry, I thought it was not Ramsey.
Right. This is for 21 Mays Lane, which has already outlined permission. Over to the officer.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this application is a detailed application regarding 5 bungalows and the alteration of the existing dwelling on site. So the outline principle of dwellings on this site has already been approved by members in March of this year. The application site is located on the western side of Mays Lane in a wholly residential area. The site forms part of the rear garden of 21 Mays Lane, and as you can see from the plan there, there's development to the south in Bayview Crescent. You can see again from this plan the area is wholly residential. To the south you can see single-storey properties along Bayview Crescent and a mixture of bungalows and 2-storey properties along Mays Lane. This is a site photograph of the proposed access through to the site. 21 Mays Lane is this one here, 17 is this one here. This projecting element on 21 is proposed to be demolished to make way for the access. Again, you can see this from the front view of the site. This projecting element is to be demolished for the vehicular access into the site from Mays Lane. So view looking back towards number 21. In the rear garden, you can see is largely laid to grass with few ornamental trees. There's a view looking north. You can see the rear of the properties along Mays Lane. There's a number of outbuildings, small outbuildings within the garden and shrubbed areas. So view looking south, you can see the single-storey properties in Bayview Crescent and the 1.8 metre close bordered fencing that borders the site in this location. So the proposed layout is very similar to the draft plans showing outline stage. access from Maze Lane with visibility displays, public footpath along the northern section of the access into the site, 5 detached 3-bedroom properties, all with over 100 square metre garden sizes. The majority of the properties have 3 parking spaces, and there's 2 additional visitors parking spaces in this location. You can see the area to be demolished on number 21 Maze Lane is hashed there. The access road is 6 metres wide, and there's various areas of landscaping that you'll see on the comprehensive landscaping scheme that's been submitted. You can see there's areas of shrub planting and trees within key open spaces within the site and to the front of properties. There's a mixture of 3 different dwelling types, all very similar. Traditional brick-built pitched roof bungalows with slate roofs, with projecting entrance canopies and brick plinths to enhance the appearance of the properties. Traditional pitched roof garages, 3x7 internal, so they meet with the standards of the current parking standards. And there's 1 double garage at the rear of the site, which will serve the 2 bungalows towards the west. So, as I said previously, the application was approved by members earlier this year for 5 detached bungalows. This followed a previous refusal for 13, which was considered to be overdevelopment of the site. So in terms of this application, the space in between the properties is sufficient. It leads to a well thought out spacious development with areas of landscape in between the properties. Highways accept the layout, which is in accordance with their comments, which were provided at outline stage, and 2.4 by 42 metre visibility displays can be afforded to the site access. There's a turning head at the end of the site which allows for refuse vehicle turning, and as I said previously, there's a minimum of 3 spaces and 2 visitor spaces, so the development will be well served by parking. To the south, there's good space into the residential properties, and to the north, again, the single-storey nature of the development reduces any perceived impact in terms of the impact on residences. The tree officer, landscaping officer, is happy with the level of landscaping which we've secured during the application, which shows a good degree of landscaping and planting. And as agreed at outline stage, bird and bat boxes are proposed within the rears of the properties that are proposed to boost the biodiversity credentials of the site. So in the absence of any objections from Highways, the Council's Trees and Landscaping Officer, and in respect of the character and pattern development in the vicinity, the application is recommended for approval. There's been no objections from any local residents. Thank you.
No, I don't have anybody in the public speaking session, but I would draw your attention in particular to the representations from the Little Oakley Parish Council. On page 21, it's para 5.1, and then we go straight to speakers. So, Councillor Everett.
Thank you. I'm slightly confused by the visibility displays onto the main road, and I brought this up at the site meeting because members will remember that a month ago we had an application in front of us because it had not been possible to implement the visibility displays because the visibility displays were not in the direct control of the owner of the development. Now, according to this proposed layout, the visibility display wouldn't be under the control of the owner because the red line actually cuts off part of the visibility display. Now, I was told at the site meeting that in fact the owner owns that other property below as well. Have we got confirmation of that, and therefore could the visibility display be implemented?
Thank you. Yeah, the visibility display would cross highway land to the front of that property. So they can be achieved, and Essex County Council Highways have got no objections to that. It doesn't cross any part of the site to the south.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Councillor Benison, thank you.
Thank you. Going back to the representation from Little Oakley Parish Council, with regard to the refuse and recycling bins, I asked the question this morning, and I was told that there is access for bin lorries to make their way up the road to collect refuse, so there would be no no impact on Maze Lane. Can you confirm that that's the case, please?
Yeah, the access is actually 6 metres wide and there's a turning head at the end, so there is provision for people to leave refuge at the front of their properties and that will be collected. Yep.
Councillor Holmes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, it all looks very, very good to me. I can't see any problems with it at all, except for this side of the road here, there's no pavement, there's no footpath. Just at this end, is that a little zebra crossing of such there? Do you know?
No, that's not a zebra crossing. You mean at this end here?
No, this end.
This end? No, that's just to denote the turning head, I believe. But yeah, there wouldn't be any provision of footpath on the southern side.
Because
there's sufficient.
There's no. I mean, if you come out of this bungalow here in particular, they've got to walk along the road, and that.
I would say today it's a development for 5 bungalows. There'll be minimal traffic movement, so obviously
They'll just be able to cross the road. Okay,
yeah,
fine, no problems then.
Little Oakley did say in their representation they were request the street lighting should be LED. Well, that's a fair comment, and could be adopted by Little Oakley Parish Council. So I'd like the officers' views. Can we specify that?
That's an agreement between Essex County Council Highways and the owner and the parish that will be made after the granting of planning permission. That's done by a separate legislation who adopts the actual streetlights. But all new streetlights are LED, so that will be confirmed.
Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. Given all the information that we have in front of us this evening and the officers' responses to us here, I just feel, well, I would like to actually propose approval of this actual scheme. Thank you.
And I think the indication there's a seconder at least over here. Yes. Any further comments? And I don't suppose the officer wishes to comment on it before I take the vote. So those in favour of approving this application, there's no, there is 3 conditions as shown on page 18.
Can I just make a comment? Is that too late?
I've asked for a vote and people have voted now, so I think it probably is a bit late, yes. It's unanimous. That is approved.
What I was going...
Yeah, go on.
I'm allowed to say what I wanted to say, is can this development go on the main drains, if there are main drains in the area? Can we put an informational thing on that, if that's possible? Had such problems in our village with septic tanks where there are main drains, and this is an ongoing problem. Are we allowed to do that?
Yes, we can put it on as an informative.
Informative.
That's fine, yeah, if main drains are available.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Right, councillors, we move on to the third and possibly final item tonight, and that is application number 1701221, and this again is a planning application where outline has been granted. So this is a detailed application for land, Blue Gates Farm at Alresford.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, as the Chairman states, this is a detailed application for the construction of 9 three-bedroom detached bungalows. The outline was approved by members in May of last year. The application site is located on the northeastern side of Colchester Main Road, on the northern side of the village of Alresford. As you can see, on the opposite side of Colchester Main Road is ribbon development in the form of detached bungalows and 2-storey properties, and further residential properties are to the south on the application site side. The application site is in agricultural use at present. Along the frontage of the site runs a gas pipe easement, which is approximately 5 metres wide, and along the site frontage is a mature hedgerow. To the south of the site is a premier retail shop, and residents can access that from the public footpath which runs on the opposite side of Colchester Main Road and into the village of Alresford to the south. This is a view of the site looking southeast from within the actual site. The view of the site's southern boundary of Rainbow Cottage, which is formed by a mixture of vegetation and fencing. It's the frontage of the site, which shows the hedgerow, which is going to be removed and set back to afford vehicle visibility displays. This is a view of the properties on the opposite side, so you can see there's a mixture of detached bungalows and 2-storey properties further towards the Alresford end of the development. So the proposal shows a linear form of development. The original plans showed a bungalow to the front and garage into the front. Officers sought amended plans to secure a more linear form, which will be more in keeping with the character of the locality. Development will be served by central access, flanked by 2-metre wide footpaths and private drives spurring off to the north and south. Each private drive will have a 1.3 metre footpath to lead to the footpaths within the central area. To the front of the site, the hedgerow is to be removed and set back behind the vehicle visibility displays of 2.4 by 120 metres, and additional planting and trees has been secured on the perimeters of the site and trees along the frontage as well. Access to the rear farmer's field has been retained centrally from the access. In terms of the development, the bungalows are all of similar design. There's 6 different types, all brick with tiles to the roof, traditional hip-style dwellings, all 3-bedroom, incorporating bay windows and brick plinths to add interest to the design. Some of the properties have front entrance doors and some to the side. And the garage elevations just show traditional pitched roof garages with brick-built walls and pan tiles to the roof. Again, they accord with the current parking standards. So in terms of the merits of the scheme, the linear form of development is considered to be in keeping with the character of the area, and it forms a logical rounding off of the development, as members agreed at outline stage when the application was approved. The central access with a footway either side to be adopted to highway standards is in accordance with their comments at outline stage, and the turning head centrally allows for refuse vehicles and have bin stores located at the front of the site. In terms of the landscaping, the replanting of the front hedgerow in a setback location, which was agreed at outline stage, is considered to be acceptable in principle, and the landscaping officer is satisfied with the provision of additional birch and ash trees to the front of the site and planting around the perimeters of the actual development boundary. It's acceptable in views against the countryside from the west. In terms of the actual removal of the hedgerow, conditions are proposed in terms of clearing it outside of the bird nesting season, and an ecological enhancement scheme to secure bird and bat boxes is proposed to boost the biodiversity credentials of the site. So in terms of the actual development, each property would be served by a private amenity space in excess of 100 square metres, and each property is served by a minimum of 3 parking spaces, and 2 visitors' parking spaces are located along the private drive to the south. In terms of the impact on residents, the single-storey nature of the properties and the distance involved ensures that any impact would be minimal. Consequently, in the absence of any objections from Essex County Council Highways and in terms of the landscape impact of the development, it's recommended for approval. The parish have outlined comments in respect of they welcome the linear form of the development and they wish to have the maintenance of the roadside hedges and ditches and green space detailed, so a condition's been put on to secure a landscape management scheme. And in terms of the actual speed limit, they have concerns in regards to 40 miles per hour speed limit in that location, but highways are happy with the visibilities that can be achieved in that location, visibility displays. So the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now then, as you'd expect, the ward councillor, Councillor Scott. We'll call him right to the front. The parish council, having said that they let their comments stand when I spoke to their chairman this morning.
Good evening, Chairman, councillors. Thank you for visiting today. Even though I wasn't there, I was the other end and I missed you guys. But I met the development. Thank you very much, Councillor Alexander. Just a few comments, really. I'm not speaking against or for the application, but it does actually improve that part of the village in terms of the section of the road. On the comments on the highways, I fully support what the parish council is saying. This road, the B1027, has about approximately 11,000 vehicle movements a day, and it increases by 10% every day, every year, I should say. And I'm quite keen for the developer to perhaps consider assisting highways and maybe have some improvements along the stretch of the road. I would like, if possible, the reduction of the speed limit pushed from this committee from 40 to 30, and maybe some highway improvements along this stretch of the road, maybe a mini roundabout at the junction or Station Road on the main road, because this road is people do speed. The further down the same road, there's a speed camera there. In 2003, I managed to achieve to get the speed camera installed going the other way, but people speeding come into the village the other way. And having some maybe reduction in the speed limit along that side, and possibly highway improvements like maybe a mini roundabout there, that would actually assist in reduction of the speed limit on this road, which the parish council really need to, and the county council and myself are working together to reduce the speed limit on this road. So I'm keen for that, Chairman and councillors. Parish council say there's insufficient parking spaces, but the office has already answered that. In terms of the layout, it's fine to me. I have no problems with that. I have suggested to the developer maybe have a footpath along the front of either side. But obviously, that's up to the committee whether to enforce that. But I have no problems there with Bellmouth. I think that's sufficient for highway measures. But if it could be possible, I have spoken to the developer, and we may be able to think about it possibly. But overall, I have no problems with this, and I think it'd be a nice setting for this area. In terms of environmental side, I'm pleased about the bats and the boxes for that purpose, because we do have a lot of wildlife and bats in this part of the world. And but my emphasis tonight to speak at the committee is regarding the road itself. I know councillors did go to the highways all members briefing last week, and we talked about PR1 and PR2 roads, and B1027, as you know, is a PR2 road, and I've always said that the B1027 should be upgraded and improved, and if we can have some highway measures here, it may actually try and improve and upgrade the road from a PR2 to PR1. I think it'd be beneficial to all residents throughout the district on the B1027 from Colchester right through St Osoph and up to Clapton. So if there's any highway measures we can put here, it may actually encourage highways to think about other areas of the road too, Chairman. Councillor, thank you.
Thank you very much. Those of you that weren't at the highways meeting the other night would be lost what PR1 and PR2 and non-categorised roads are. They do depend very much on the speed of the road and the state of the road, all those sort of things. and depending if you wanted some road works done, at the present moment, you have more chance of getting it done if it's a PR1 road rather than a PR2 or a non-qualified road. Right. Don't think there's anything that Mr. Lang wants to comment on, but if he does, he's welcome to.
All I would say in regard to the highway improvements, it's similar to the first application. Essex County Council highways haven't requested them as necessary to make the development acceptable. Obviously, the rounding off of the development of Alresford will obviously add emphasis to a reduction in that speed limit as you enter. If there's residential development on both sides, then a reduction in the speed limit could be it gives added emphasis to the argument. But actually, to achieve those highway improvements as part of this development, it's not required to make the development acceptable.
This morning when we looked at it, I haven't got a list of speakers yet, but when we looked at it, my own fears were such a shame to take that hedge out, but it's been explained why it's got to come out to get that sight line in, and also that we've got this high pressure gas main which runs right the way through there as well, so it is awkward, but it is a pity to lose that established hedge, but there are going to be replacements for it set back. So, right, any further speakers, please? Yes, Councillor Heaney, and then I'll go to Councillor.
I'm just going to say again, which I've said in the last one, I've said it too late, owing to the problems I've had, can this please go on the main drains if there are main drains available, which I suspect there are. Can we put whatever it's called, information, whatever it's called? Informative, I can never remember that word. Thank you very much.
Good. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the speed reduction, I was just going to say that, maybe Alresford Parish Council should put a request in now for a speed reduction, because if we're minded to approve this, because it takes so long to get one. And secondly, can you just confirm with regard to the landscaping management that will include the parish council's request that they have some involvement in the maintenance site? Would that be part of the condition? Thank you.
Yeah, the standard condition states that the applicant has to submit a landscape management scheme, so we would put an informative on maybe to say the parish wants to be involved with those discussions to ensure that dialogue is open between the parish and the applicant.
And I know discussions were taking place even this morning with the chairman of the parish council and the contractors. Right. Any further comments? Councillor McWilliams.
If there are no further comments, I think we've heard quite a lot. We had a lot of information this morning because we were just interested, and on my part, I'm just nosy. But I would like to actually put forward, a proposal that we do approve this application. Thank you.
Right. Anybody wish? Yes, Councillor.
I would like to second that.
Thank you. Don't think Mr. Lang will want to come back on it. No, he says. In which case we're voting for approval with the conditions as shown on page 26, 1 through to 5. And I look to our local councillor. Perhaps he can confirm whether or not there is a main sewer there, or whether we need to put an advice.
I'm advised by the person to my right, who is, I would also like to add that the developer is saying that there isn't going to be a company or something to maintain a landscaping company to maintain the greenery area, so it may not necessarily be the parish council piece on, but I know the developer is taking on board.
Right.
And I would emphasise the fact, Chairman and councillors, about reducing the speed limit.
Yeah, I'm going to take a vote now. We've got a proposer and a second. Are those in favour then, with the conditions as shown in 5? That is unanimous. That application is approved. Thank you, councillors. It didn't achieve my aim of finishing at 7, but there we are.
Why I know all about the drains is because I got this development, the main drain right outside in the road, and they hadn't done it, and they put septic tanks in these tiny gardens, and the drain, it's going to really rot up things for the neighbours and for themselves.
Yes.
And that's why, and the reason they can get away with it is because we didn't put it in our, when we, passed it. So I'm going to be reading on every time, I'm afraid, John. Because even when the main drains are there, they didn't use them.
Yes. Well, there we go. Still not time for you